What's up, metalheads? It's Death Metal Dave in your face here on MetalMessiahRadio.com. And I have a longtime friend, another longtime friend of mine, legendary drummer and vocalist, Mike Browning. What's up, Mike?
All right. How you doing, Dave?
Fucking awesome, man. Finally got you on here. I know we've done a little bit in the past, little short snippets, but it's time we do a history of Mike Browning, if you will.
Oh, that'll be a long one, bro. yeah, we haven't gotten to that yet, so we'll definitely do, something good today.
Hell yeah. So you're in Nocturnus AD, and what was your first band? How did you get started into the music business, and did you grow up in Tampa?
Oh, yeah. I've lived in Tampa my whole life.
What influenced you?
I don't know. I mean, my mom sang in a band when I was really young. And it wasn't anything big. She just did clubs and stuff like that, and commercial stuff, like Janis Joplin, things like that back in the
killer.
70s. Yeah, and I used to watch them practice. And when I was in junior high school, actually, I started playing drums, in the school band. And I went on, into just the first year of high school. I was in the marching band and all that. And I couldn't keep going because, like the band for Plant High School, you had to practice like 2 hours a day after school every day for the marching band.
Wow.
And, I had to get a job when I was 16 for a car and all that. So I couldn't really practice every day after school. And so I didn't stay in the band after 10th grade. But, by then I had kind of just started to get a drum set. Around 11th grade, I got a drum set and started kind of playing a little bit by myself to records. I would literally have like a turntable behind my drum set and two big speakers on each side of me. And I would, drop the needle on the record and just start kind of playing the songs, things like that.
What kind of bands?
Well, the good thing was by my house, I live in South Tampa area, and on Kennedy, for the people there in Tampa, there was a music store, a record store, I should say, called Asylum Records.
Yes.
And I believe the guy's name was Fred that owned it. And he was kind of like a 70s kind of metalhead guy. And he imported, it was when the British invasion of metal started, with Iron Maiden and everything. Right. And so I would literally ride my bicycle, I wasn't even in a car yet. I would literally ride my bicycle there because it was only, like maybe 10, 12 blocks from my house. So I'd ride up there and he would be playing albums and he'd show me, oh, I just got this in from Europe. I just got this in from England, and he would show me like Iron Maiden's cover or something like that, Angel Witch, things like that. He would show me these bands, and I would buy the record. So it kind of started with that. I mean, I always liked stuff like Led Zeppelin and Pink Floyd, that some of the Black Sabbath, of course. I listened to a lot of Black Sabbath, but then when I discovered that Asylum record store, he started getting the imports in. And that's when I really started getting more into metal, other than the mainstream stuff like Sabbath, things like that.
Right.
So it was kind of cool. If that hadn't happened, I probably wouldn't be into the type of music that I'm into, I mean, I would have been more generalized, like I said, like Black Sabbath, Deep Purple, things like that. But he was the one that definitely turned me on to all the import stuff, because that's all what he carried in his store quite a bit. So I would get those kind of records and bring them home and try to practice to them.
Cool.
And and then I was in high school in my last year in 12th grade, and this new student came into the school about halfway through the school year, and I met him. He was like a year younger than me, but he was in 11th grade and I was in 12th, and I met him. And, there used to be a place where people used to kind of hang out, the cool, the metalhead kind of people, not, rockers and metalheads, things like that. And, I met him there, and he, we started talking, and he was into the Necronomicon. I was into the Necronomicon. Things like that. He had, the Satanic Bible, and so did I. And we started talking. Then we started talking about music. And he's like, "Oh, I just got a guitar for Christmas," and it was his first guitar too. It was funny. And I said, "Oh, I play drums." So we started talking, and I ended up going over to his house. And I remember seeing him, just pick up the guitar in his bedroom without even hardly anything. and just kind of like go crazy on it. And I was like, this is pretty cool. This guy, definitely wants to do, I think he was more than I was into the Dungeons and Dragons and things like that. So, we had a lot of things in common, and it just kind of worked out that way. And we're like, oh, let's get some equipment together and start playing, And there was another guy in the school that we got for a singer, and then we found there was a music store that I forgot what the name of it was, but it was right on the corner of like Lois and Henderson, and it was like an independent music store, and that's where I got my first couple drum sets from there. And they used to have the message board on there, so we put a message board up for a bass player, and found another guitar player, and we found a couple guys. One of them was named Mike. I remember and Dave, I think, was the name of the bass player. But anyway, we put a little 5-piece band together, and in 1982.
What was the name?
It was called Ice. ICE.
Okay.
And yeah, Ice. And it was kind of like, from the abyss, the frozen abyss.
Yeah.
There was Trey came up with the name actually, and I thought it sounded pretty cool.
So that's Trey that you were talking about that you met, and
yeah.
Gotcha.
And so yeah, we put the band together, and we did like the local, like the high school talent show.
Oh.
And it was just, we it was like, I think we did stuff like Scorpions, and we did about 4 or 5 songs, and it actually went over pretty well. But the thing was, I graduated, and then he moved to the other side of like the north side of Tampa, pretty far away. And back then, you didn't have computer, you didn't have cell phone, and we kind of lost contact for about 6 months or so.
Gotcha.
And I kept jamming with the other guitar player and the bass player, and they had another guitar player, and I don't remember what we were going to call it, but we had like this little, like it was going to be like a bar band thing, just playing covers and stuff like that. And, UFO, Scorpions, stuff,
Yeah.
things like that. And then all of a sudden Trey he found out where I was somehow. I guess he was asking people, and he actually showed up we had a house at that point. I think I was 18 still. And, I might have been 19. But anyway, he showed up there and said, hey, I got a bass player now, and we have this band going, but the drummer's like older than us, and he's not really understanding what we're doing. And he was from like Lakeland or something like that, the drummer. And they're like, he's just not kind of doing it. And, would you want to join with us? And I'm like, sure. So I kind of quit that band and joined that band, and it was called Death Watch.
Okay.
And they had a singer named Charles, went by Chuck. He kind of sounded like the Cyrus Ungle guy, if you're familiar with that band.
Yeah.
He had that kind of weird, raspy, kind of weird voice. But
I remember hearing about Death Watch.
Yeah. So we did only some parties and things like that. And then the singer got arrested for trafficking cocaine, and we didn't even know he was doing that. And he got like 10 years, and he went away too for probably most of that, I believe. Cause I didn't see him ever again for like maybe 15 years or so. Then I ran into him. I've ran into him a couple of times here and there when I used to live, in the other side of town, in Seminole Heights. I used to see him at the post office every once in a while when we had a post office box there. So I ran into him there, which was kind of cool. And he actually gave me some tapes that he had. Yeah, they had some with the old drummer before me, and then he had a couple, with me. And we were doing all originals pretty much at that point. I mean, we'd do a couple covers here and there of like Angel Witch, something weird like that.
Cool.
And but yeah, so that kind of happened, and then so we kind of like were on the search for another singer after that. And after that, we kind of dropped the Death Watch name, and it became Heretic.
Okay. Yeah.
And it was just me and Trey and Dallas, just the three of us, and it was Heretic. And we tried out several singers, and it didn't. We really hadn't found anybody. And then we found out there was another Heretic in California at the time. And I believe this would have been like 1984, probably or early 85, maybe. I think it was still 1984. And that's when we kind of changed the name from Heretic to Morbid Angel. Because some friend of Trey's was like, man, you guys, your music is really morbid. And I think that was when, Morbid Tales, stuff like that was just coming out as well. And that's why I think he used that term morbid, because we all used to like Hellhammer and Celtic Frost for sure. And
right. Yeah. So while you were doing all this, what kind of local shows, was there a lot of local shows that you were attending?
Really, not really. Back then there was a place, Mark Twain, and which turned into the Power Company.
I've heard about that.
Yeah. And that's where I saw Argus.
Okay. Yeah. Killer band.
Yeah, they were amazing. Back then, especially, I was like, wow, they used to do Angel Witch and all kinds of Black Sabbath. They did a Black Sabbath, tribute that was like 20 minutes long, like a medley of songs. And I was just like, wow, this band was really good, but they were really an A circuit band. They did put out an EP, with like 4 songs on it back then. I think it came out in 84 maybe. Right. And, they had I remember it was really big because they were like one of the first bands to come out of Tampa that was metal, that they went to Columbia and played back then.
Yeah. I think, Nasty Savage quotes them as being an influence, actually.
Probably so, because they were like them, and then you had Avatar.
Yes.
So it was like those 2 bands were like the only big kind of metal bands. And then the Brandon Pub, which I'm sure you might remember that.
Oh yeah, I played there.
Oh, okay, yeah, great. Yeah, so the Brandon Pub opened up, and I started going there quite a bit. So there was like the Power Company and the Brandon Pub, and that was pretty much it for metal at the time.
Gotcha.
And so I started going there, and that's when Avatar became Sabotage, and they started playing there quite a bit, as you know.
Yeah.
I'm sure we were all at those shows together.
Well, I didn't move here till 87, and I probably met you about that time.
Okay. Yeah. That would have been, later then. Wow.
Yeah. I was 18.
Yeah, it was like 85. And I remember when we turned into Morbid Angel, we were just doing parties really most of the time, because we weren't old enough really to be doing the bar circuit and things like that. And we didn't want to do, the bar circuit, to tell you the truth. We weren't a cover band.
So, and how did you get into doing the vocals?
Well, it just got to be tried out so many people, and then it ended up Dallas was singing, and the bass player, and then we got Richard Burnell in the band.
Right.
And I was at a party, and he was there, and I talked to him, and I was like, hey man, we're looking to get a second guitar player, because our guitar player Trey, he does so many leads, it's just bass and drums most of the time and leads. And so we're kind of looking for somebody to, play some rhythms and, maybe do some harmony stuff and stuff. And Richard's like, I'll try out. And so we got him in the band, and it worked out really well. And then he tried to sing, but the problem was he couldn't sing and play guitar at the same time. So every time he would start to sing, he would have to stop playing guitar. And that kind of defeated the purpose of having 2 guitar players. But, but Dallas was doing most of the vocals then. And we played at the Power Company I believe with Massacre. It was one of their shows. And we played there, and we played another, I forgot what the place was. It was like a teen center place.
Was that in Brandon?
Yeah.
Yeah. I can't remember what it was. It was,
we played there with Massacre as well.
That place was open for a while. So was Brandon Pub. That was open for a long time.
And I think we played with Death as well at the Power Company once. And that's when, of course, Obituary was Executioner.
City Lights, maybe? Brandon City Light or something like that. I don't remember.
City Lights. Yeah, I think that's what it was called, maybe.
I can't remember. I just remember going to City Lights. And I think that was Brandon.
Started playing there quite a bit as well.
Yes.
Because they were doing really well at the time. And that's kind of, and then Dallas ended up getting arrested and went to jail for like a year. So, and
wow.
we had to get another bass player. And at that point I was just like, you know what? I used to listen to Exciter a lot, and they had a singing drummer. So I was like, I'll try to sing and play. I knew the songs quite well, cause we wrote them. Me and Trey wrote them together, and I knew all the words to everything. And I said, well, I'll try to sing and play drums and see if I can do it. And it just sort of happened that way. And then we got Johnny Ortega, who lived in Winter Haven. We got him on bass, and then we started kind of getting more serious, and we did a show at that City Lights place. And then, we did another, we didn't do we did one power company show with John Ortega too. And then, a guy, I don't know if you remember him or not, but he might have moved before you got here, which I think he did, but his name was Metal Mike. Not me.
Don't remember.
Another guy. And he had like blonde hair, like curly blonde hair, and he had moved, and he called me one day and said, hey, I'm living in North Carolina, and I'm jamming in this band, and this guy that's the bass player, he has a record label and a backer with a bunch of money. And he said, I told him about you guys, and I told him about Massacre too, and he kind of wants to sign both of you guys. So we made like a little homemade demo and sent it to him, and then it ended up being David Vincent was the guy,
right?
That he was playing in a band with, and I believe they were called Barren Cemetery, maybe at the time. And so we sent the demo, and he sent us a record contract, and we signed it, and we went up to North Carolina, and this was in 1986, and we recorded an album called Abominations of Desolation.
Right.
So
eventually got released later on.
Right. Yeah. So, the band split up before. Well, it was weird because we went to record, and we recorded all the songs, and then we were in North Carolina, and then David Vincent says to me and Johnny and Richard, he goes, well, it's costing a lot to keep you guys here in the hotel, and the mixing's going to take another, we're going to work on the mixing for several days. And I can't really, the budget's going to be too much, and we got to send you guys back to Tampa, and I'm just going to keep Trey here, and we're going to mix the record. And I'm like, great,
yeah,
that's so he sent us back, and we didn't have any idea how it was going to end up sounding at that point. And then when Trey came back, he was like a completely different person.
Huh. How long was he up there?
About a week.
Oh, okay. After you guys?
Yeah, after we left, he was there for about a whole week. And then he came back, and he was like, oh, man, we got to get rid of our bass player. He told, me and Richard, we got to get rid of Johnny. His tracks were so terrible. He sounds like a guitar player playing bass, and which he actually was, but, I thought it sounded fine,
Right.
And so, he was like, David Vincent knows this other guy named Sterling. And he lives in Atlanta, and he's going to have him come down and try out for you guys. And all this was just changed overnight, almost like, in a week, actually. Yeah. When Trey got back, I was like, whoa, this is really weird. It's not like what it was. And that kind of became more business at that point.
Right. Gotcha.
And so we ended up trying out Sterling, and he came and ended up being the bass player. He moved down here, and what we were going to do was take Johnny's tracks off and have Sterling redo the bass tracks. And that's why the album didn't come out when it was supposed to.
Gotcha.
And then we did another show with at a new place that had opened up, which was the Volley Club. Right.
Remember that? Yep.
Yeah. So we did a show there as Morbid Angel and Amon was opening, which became Theocide. And we did a show there, and it was really a really good show too. And then after that, the band just it kind of imploded and split in half. And, Trey and Richard ended up going to North Carolina and playing with David Vincent and the drummer that he had at the time, Wayne Hartzell. And they put out that Thy Kingdom Come demo, because Pete wasn't the drummer after me. It was Wayne. Wayne Hartzell is the next drummer after me in Morbid Angel.
Gotcha.
So a lot of people think it was me and then Pete, but it wasn't. There was another guy in between me and Pete, and he played on that Thy Kingdom Come demo. So there's actual, real, things you can, to know that that's a real fact.
Right. Gotcha.
Because he actually played on those songs. And then I guess, I don't know what happened with Wayne. He quit the band, and then they got Pete and became, the Morbid Angel that most people know.
Right.
So that's kind of like what happened with that. And then after that, Sterling and I stayed together, and Sterling had a band in Atlanta called Incubus. And he's like, well, let's just redo Incubus. And I said, okay,
And I always tell everybody the real Incubus, the original, and not the pop band and not the band from New Orleans.
Right. Well, Sterling knew those guys, and he said, man, I had Incubus up there before they had Incubus, and they had heard my band, and then all of a sudden they had a band called Incubus. So I don't know what really happened with that, who was actually first.
Right.
The two metal Incubus bands were way before the commercial band, that's for sure, by like 20 years. So, I don't know. Those guys said, oh, we'd never heard of the other Incubus until, we already had the band too. So I don't know really what was the truth. But I know Sterling had the band, back in 85, he had Incubus going. So that was in Atlanta. And so we kind of redid that and got a guitar player named Gino. And that just, those two were just crazy people, Gino and they were seriously, mentally crazy people. And they got into a fight one day when I was at work. They were drunk and they got into a fight, and then the band split up. And so Incubus only lasted like 6 months.
Wow.
And that's when I was, then at that point I was just tired of the whole thing. I said, man, I'm just going to do something completely different. I'm going to have my own band. I'm tired of playing in other people's bands. So I came up with Nocturnus and started, playing with Richard Bateman.
That's when I moved here.
Right. 87. Yep. That'd be 87. And me and Richard found a guitar player, Vince Crowley. He was in a band called Entity, and I'd seen them play a couple times, and his band kind of had just split up. So he joined with me and Richard.
So he was living down here?
Yeah.
Because I thought he was originally from somewhere else, Ohio or
something. Originally he was from here.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
Yeah. He ended up moving a couple of times back and forth, actually.
I see.
But, so he had his band had just split up. Richard had just left Agent Steel.
Right. Yep.
I had just left, Incubus and Morbid Angel. And so we kind of formed a band and called it, and I came up with the name Nocturnus. And so we started playing, and then eventually we got a second guitar player, which ended up being Gino back in the band.
Right.
Because I think Gino had went to jail for a couple of months, something small. But,
these damn metalheads in their jail.
I know. A lot of them have.
Yeah.
That's for sure. Mm-hmm. Not me, though. I somehow got by all that. Not that I wrong, but I somehow got lucky.
Speaking of which, you're straight edge, so pretty much is what we call it, right? No drugs, no alcohol. Were you always like that?
No. I mean, the one thing is I never drank. I mean, I drank some in high school a little bit, and I really didn't like it. It for some reason, alcohol, it didn't really do a lot to me when I did drink. And I was like, this is kind of stupid. I didn't really get into it. I didn't like beer that much. I didn't drink alcohol hardly ever. So I just don't, it's not like I'm straight edge,
right.
Like against all that stuff. And I did plenty of years of partying, with other things here and there, but I didn't go overboard with anything, and I was never addicted to anything. So I don't have that addictive personality, luckily. So I never got any kind of addiction to anything that I ever did. And I partied, but I never got out of hand with it. That was the difference. And then, I had a daughter, of course, and I had custody of her, and I just was like, hey, I got to quit kind of pretty much doing everything and kind of straighten up my life. And so I kind of did do that.
That'll do it.
Yeah, that will do it, as you know.
For most people.
Yeah.
Some people still fall to the demons, if you will.
Oh, yeah. You know, so, I mean, I've seen plenty of it, believe me, you know, playing in these bands like Brunel, people like that. I've seen people just, you know, like go off the deep end and end up dying.
Man, Richard was such a good dude. I like that dude. He was...
Yeah, Richard was one of the nicest people I've ever met.
Yeah, he was so cool.
He just you know, he got into the crack thing really bad, and it just took over his life. And I tried to help him several times, and other people tried to help him. His parents tried to help him. His sister tried to help. You know, like everybody tried to help him. And he would go for periods where he would start doing really well, and then all of a sudden, just bam, be right back there again.
Yeah, it's unfortunate too.
Yeah, so, I know. It was.
So I'm staring at my copy that I purchased from you, the Science of Horror demo, 1988. Yeah, I got it right here in my hand. Love it.
Wow, those are super rare now, but they're a lot of people want those.
And I'll never part with it. It's going in the museum shit. So
nice.
And yeah, so you did a Nocturnus demo, and then you did the Science of Horror. And how did you get it? How did it go about getting signed?
Well,
man, you guys did a lot of shows too, by the way. I remember seeing you all over. So
yeah, we were playing out quite a bit. We did a lot of shows with you know, Obituary back then, actually, and started doing shows with Atheist and people like that. So it was good. You know, we did a lot of shows. We you know, didn't mind playing live, but it was always local stuff. And I think we didn't actually ever play out of town till 1989. It was our first trip out of the state and out of the country as well. We played in Mexico City in 1989.
Oh, wow.
And
nice.
We had already recorded the key by then. But yeah, we did a demo that was done on like a little 8-track reel to reel at this guy's house, and then that was the first demo with Vince and Gino and me and Richard. And then Richard quit to join Nasty Savage, actually. And then Vince kind of got fed up with Tampa in general. And he's like, he really does not like living in Tampa, like the heat. He can't stand it.
Gotcha. Some people don't.
Yeah, it's getting harder for me to deal with too, I'll tell you that. But you know, he's like, I'm moving up north, and it's just, you know, I'm going to try to put my own band together up there. So, you know, that's when Richard quit. That happened too. And it was just like, you know, and then I was just with Gino. And so Gino's like, hey, my cousin plays guitar, Mike Davis. And, you know, he knows a bass player that, you know, they all kind of went to school together. And so we got those two guys, which is Jeff Estes and Mike Davis. And, so we were a 4-piece at that point, no keyboards yet. And we started, you know, playing parties again and starting to play out a little bit. And then, I remember we were getting ready to do that Science of Horror demo, and I was asking everybody, I was like, you know, I'd like to get somebody that plays keyboards to come up with some intros for us for the demo. And they were like, hey, you know, this guy we went to school with plays keyboards, and he's got this really cool synthesizer that makes all kinds of weird sounds, and we can get him to do a couple intros. And so we did that. You know, they talked to him. It was Lou, ended up being Lou Panzer, who ended up being in the band. Yeah. And he wrote like 2 intros for us, and he brought his keyboard out to the warehouse where we were practicing. And, he, hooked up the keyboards through the PA that we had. We had a pretty loud PA back then, and he hooked it up and started playing the intro. And then we were like, sounded great, you know? And so we went into the song. You're like, do that again. And so he played the intro, and we went right into the song just to see what it would sound like. And then while we were playing the song, he started kind of like trying to play along with us in some of the parts of the music, you know?
Yeah.
And to me, I mean, I always listened to stuff that had keyboards in it, like Deep Purple, Pink Floyd. You know? So I thought, you know, it would be kind of cool to have a keyboard player in the band.
Yeah.
And nobody really did that with metal at the time. I mean, I'm sure there probably was, but, you know, not so much full time. So we ended up getting him in the band. And that was just like a month before we ended up recording the Science of Horror demo. In fact, like I said, we had already planned to record the demo, and we were just looking for somebody to write us an intro or two for the demo. And what happened was, because of the Brandon pub, I knew John Oliva from Savatage, because I used to go there and see them all the time. And I used to talk to John quite a bit back then. And he was telling me, hey, we got this little studio in St. Pete that we're doing like pre-production for our next album. And they were already on a major label by then. And he's like, we got this whole studio booked for a month to do pre-production. They weren't doing the actual recording there. They were just doing like a pre-production demo where they do like 20 songs and then they pick like 10 of them for the record,
Oh yeah.
And he's like, yeah, we're doing that there. And he goes, we're finished. And he goes, I got a whole nother weekend left there that's already paid for. He goes, if you guys want to pay me, to come in there, and I'll do a demo for you. And I couldn't turn that down, Yeah. He's like, $500, how's $500 and we'll work all weekend on it. And I'm like, all right, done deal, So yeah, we all threw $100 in and went out there and recorded The Science of Horror, and John Oliva ended up being our engineer and producer and everything on it pretty much, and even sang backups on it.
Wow.
A lot of people.
I didn't know that. And
he actually sang some of the backups with everybody that, so yeah, that's actually him on there.
I'm reading this right now and I don't see any mention of him anywhere on this thing.
Well, the thing was, he didn't want us to mention that because he was label.
Yeah.
But he did kind of jump in and sang with everybody just for fun.
That's cool.
And yeah, he was on a major label and he wasn't sure if he was even able to do something like that,
right. Yeah.
Because a lot of times you have to get permission from the label, and it would have been way too complicated.
Right. Yeah.
So he wanted to do it, but he also didn't want to get in trouble for doing it.
That's what's cool about John Oliva. He's always been the down to earth, loving all the Florida Tampa bands. It's fucking great. He's such a good dude, man. I mean, I wish him luck with his life.
Yeah, I know. I mean, he actually, when I was in After Death, another band, he actually did one of our demos again.
Oh, nice.
When he was working at that one, the one that was on Hillsborough that used to be at Skipper's there, Audio Lab. He was doing stuff with Greg Marchak, the guy that was working at Audio Lab. He was his engineer for a while, and they were working on some project, one of the John Oliva Dr. Butcher records.
Oh, yeah.
And so he's, I had seen him, and he's like, I was like, we're doing a demo. I was like, would you want to? He didn't record it, but he mixed it for us.
Oh, that's cool.
So we took it to him, and he mixed one of our demos again. So it was kind of cool. And this was probably, I don't know, I want to say around 2000 or something.
Right.
1990, maybe 98, somewhere around there, right around there. So yeah, we've actually had him do 2 of our demos.
That's killer, man. So back to the Nocturnus and how you record deal.
Well, it kind of actually, believe it or not, it was kind of because of Morbid Angel.
Oh, I see. Gotcha.
Yeah, they were on Earache, and Trey and Mike Davis started hanging out a lot because Mike was really good on guitar. He took a bunch of lessons and just like took off really well with that. And then, Trey has his own style. So they kind of were like hanging out quite a bit and kind of trading, like guitar information, whatever you want to call it, riffs and stuff like that. They were kind of jamming together a little bit. And Trey actually told Digby that owned Earache, hey, check out this band, Nocturnus. And so, we sent them the Science of Horror demo, and they heard it and just signed us right away.
Oh, killer. Hell yeah. And then, and how did all that go? Did you do big tours around the world and shit after that?
Yeah, we did. We, back then, a lot of bands used to get what was called tour support from the label.
Yep.
And, they would, furnish the money to do a big tour, and then you would just pay it back out of your album sales, because there was, back then,
yes,
you did pretty good album sales, and now it's not like digital, and everything's digital. So you still do good in album sales, but nowhere near what it was. And so, we recorded the album at Morris Sound, and we used Tom Morris because Digby wanted us to use Tom Morris because he did the first Morbid Angel.
Right, gotcha.
So they were like, yeah, want to keep this kind of thing going. So we used Tom Morris, put out the key, and like I said, first thing we did, right when the key first came out, we did 2 shows in Mexico City, and that was like December of 1989. And the key had just came out, I believe. And then after that, we went to Europe and did a tour, I think it was about maybe 4 weeks, maybe 6 weeks or so with Bolt Thrower.
Yes.
And Benediction.
I remember seeing those flyers.
Yeah, Benediction did some of the shows, and then we had some other bands too that jumped on the tour here and there for a few shows here and there. But most of it was Bolt Thrower headlining and us. We were like the middle band basically. And we had, some of the shows were local bands. Some of them were Benediction played, so, stuff like that. But we did like about 20 or 30 shows with Bolt Thrower over in Europe. And then right after we got back, it was like, Dig was like, hey, we're going to do this thing called the Grind Crusher Tour. They did one in Europe with Morbid Angel and Napalm. And so they wanted to do a different one with Napalm in the States. So we got on that one. And Godflesh. So it was us, God, and Napalm Death. And that was the first time like Napalm and Godflesh had ever came to America. So it was like a big thing. But, we did that show. That tour was like really long. It was like 3 months long almost.
Did you play in Tampa on that one? Like Janice Landing or something?
Yeah, we did play Janice Landing actually with that one. Yep.
You're right. Yeah. I remember it. I love Janice Landing still to this day. Yeah,
that's a great venue.
And remember they had the pole right in kind of in the front of the stage a little ways out, and everybody would mosh around the pole. Well, now they've taken that pole out and they redid the canopy, and it's 2 poles, but it's on each side. So it's kind of better, but we don't get to, or I'm not going to mosh, but they don't get to mosh around the pole anymore.
That was a big thing too. I remember that pole being right there in the middle.
Yeah, I remember people climbing that bitch too.
Oh yeah. It was a thing that was always there. That's for sure. I didn't know they took that out.
Yeah, they took that out and put one on each side, and to make it makes sense, But then you did Thresholds, and how did that come about? And you didn't do vocals.
Yeah, that was another weird thing. What happened was MTV started doing Headbangers Ball. And so bands started doing videos to get on Headbangers Ball, because that was like the only thing where you could see a metal video was on Headbangers Ball back then. And we're talking 1991, 92. So we didn't do any kind of video or anything for the key. But so when we were getting ready to do, because we had a 3-album contract with actually we had a 5-album contract, I forgot, with Earache, but it never got done. But we did the first album, then we went to do Thresholds, and they were like, hey, if you want to do everything was going really well too. And what I didn't understand, they were like, Digby said, hey, you need to quit playing drums and be the front man, because you're singing. And you got this huge drum set and nobody can see you, and the guitar players don't move around very much, and the keyboards players stuck behind the keyboards. He said, you guys have no live show. You have nobody to get the crowd going, and you're stuck.
Yeah. They wanted a front man.
Well, they wanted a front man really bad. They were like, could you imagine what you guys could do if you had a front man? And I was like, but I'm really a drummer. I'm not really a front man. I just kind of started singing and it just stuck. So they're like, well, either you play drums and get a front man, or you become the front man and get a different drummer. And I was like, well, I'm not really front man material, I don't think. So I was like, well, I'm going to play drums. And I was like, why can't we just keep it the way it is? And they're like, well, if you do that, you may not do another record, and we're going to cut your budget, and you're not going to get a video this time that we promised you would get, for a Headbangers Ball. And everybody was like, no, we got to do this. We got to do this. And I was the only one that was still against it. I was like, no, let's hold out and not do this.
Right,
everything's going to be good. And everybody else, it was like, when we signed the deal with Earache, everybody signed the contract. It was like we all kind of signed separately with Earache.
Gotcha.
They kind of did that because if somebody quit the band and became big in another band, then they actually had you contracted.
Oh, I see.
So when we signed that Earache contract, we didn't realize when we all signed it that we were all signing separately a deal as well, kind of, where they had kind of control over us.
Yeah.
So everybody was like, it was 4 against 1 to get a singer. And I didn't want to sing, of course. So I was like, well, I guess I'm just going to play drums on this next record then, and we'll get a vocalist. And we tried out a bunch of people and ended up with Dan Izzo. Because he didn't sound exactly like me, but he kind of had a style that worked with the songs and everything.
Yeah.
And he wasn't super death metal either, like deep, growling death metal, but it kind of like, it wasn't real far off from what we were doing already. So we figured that would probably be the best thing to do. And so we got him, and we did the Thresholds record. And then we did one tour in Europe with Confessor.
Oh, yeah.
And they were on Earache, of course. They had just put out their first album. So we were headlining the tour in Europe. It was like 2 months, and Confessor was opening. And it just was like, some of the shows were good, and some of them were like, people just, Thresholds came out, and I guess because it was so different from the Key, it sold about a third of what the Key did. And to a label, that's not good.
Right, yeah.
So Earache was like, well, and they were like, what's going on here? Why is this happening? And it's like, I told you, we should have kept things the way they were. And so everybody kind of was like, getting all antsy about everything. And there was like fights were starting to happen between Mike and Lou on the tour that we did with Confessor. And like one morning I woke up hearing a bunch of noise, and they were outside the bus, like just beating on each other on the ground, and I'm like, man, this is getting worse and worse. And I didn't want to be there anymore. And I had talked to Vince, when we were in Morrisound recording Thresholds. They had an A room and a B room, and Vince from Acheron, he was in Acheron, Vince Crowley, and he was redoing the first Acheron record. He was remixing it in Morrisound when we were in there recording Thresholds. So I went and saw him a couple of times, and I ended up singing some backups in Morrisound on his record, because we played in Nocturnus together.
Yeah.
So and he's like, hey man, I'm going to move back to Tampa after I do this. And I got several offers to do another album. And he's like, would you be interested in playing drums again, with me in Acheron though? And I was like, you know what? I'll do it. So I told Vince that, hey, I'll go ahead and I'll play drums on the next Acheron record. I was still in Nocturnus, and they knew I was going to do that. So they were not happy about that. And that's when I found out we did that tour with Confessor. And when we came back from the tour, we were getting ready to do our first practice after the tour. And I came in there and nothing was set up. And they were all had their heads down. They're like, look, we just think it's better if you're not in the band anymore. And I'm like, what do you mean? This is my band. I came up with the name. Yeah, but how we signed that contract? He goes, well, we're staying with Earache, and you're, it's a 4-1 decision to get rid of you. I'm
wow.
Like, what? Yeah. And they're like, well, we want to go more towards, this didn't work the way it was. And, Nocturnus has this, satanic image, and we want to get away from that and become like the next Dream Theater, but a little heavier. And I'm like, really? And they're like, yeah, and so we think, and we know you're going to do drums for Acheron. So we just think that it'd be better if you kind of just joined Acheron and let us find another drummer and do what we do, what we want to do. And I was like, at that time I was just like, forget it. I'm done. with you guys. I knew it was going to implode anyway. I knew the band was just not going to last.
You could foresee it.
Yeah. Oh yeah. They were fighting so much, and I wasn't fighting with any of them. I was just kind of like, I felt like a loner in that band. I was like no longer, everybody was friends. All those guys went to school together, so they all knew each other. And I was like older than them. I didn't know any of them before they joined the band. And it was just like, they all kind of came together behind my back, and they stole my name, trademarked it, and, said, "You're out of the band now."
Wow.
And again, it was one of those things where you didn't have internet, you didn't have cell phones, and Earache was in Europe, so I had to make a phone call, and it cost a lot of money to call Europe back then.
Yeah, it did.
And so I called Earache, and I talked to Dig, and he's like, "What?" He goes, "They fired you?" And I'm like, "Yeah, they told me that you guys were behind it." And they're like, "We don't know anything about this."
Oh, crazy.
And I'm like, "Really?" And, and I'm like, "Wow." But I had already joined Acheron, that same day I was already going to start jamming with Acheron anyway. And they had a warehouse. Vince had got a warehouse just 3 doors down from the Nocturnus one. So I was just going to go back and forth, I had my old drum set, and I had just started to get a new one because my old drum set was just dying. It was like in really bad shape.
Is that off a Skipper?
Yeah, exactly.
I remember going there, but I just don't remember it that well. I think I drank too much back then. Probably.
I mean,
I got a blur.
Almost every band used to practice. There was over 30 bands practicing there. 30.
I can't remember exactly where it was.
It was right there by the Brass Mug on Skipper.
Yeah. Jeez.
2 blocks from the Brass Mug.
Yeah. Oh.
So, so I just kind of like, took everything and walked down. Vince came over and grabbed my stuff, helped me grab my drums, and we went down there, and I was going to put a small drum set together off of other stuff that I had and just kind of practice with them and practice with Nocturnus. And so I was just like, well, I guess I'm going to be an Acheron full time now. And Vince was like, okay, that's good for me. So I joined Acheron at that point, that same day. I was out of Nocturnus and in Acheron full time. And we ended up doing, 2 albums.
Yeah.
And doing pretty well with those. It went over pretty well, actually. And then, so Nocturnus stayed together and got another drummer, and they recorded, Earache said, "You need to record a couple new songs, because I don't know what's going on with you guys now." And Dig was upset. So he said, "Record 2 songs with a new drummer, and let's see what happens." And they recorded 2 songs and sent them to Earache, and Earache dropped them.
Huh. Crazy.
Yeah, so they never did anything more on Earache after me, because they lied about it to me.
Right, yeah.
They said it was behind them and all this, and it wasn't true at all. And I was just like, I don't want to be in a band with a bunch of people like that. They backstabbed me. They lied to me.
Yeah.
Forget.
Yeah.
And but the contract is the contract. They were all on it. I was on it, and it was like 4-1. So what was I supposed to do at that point? So they ended up splitting up about a month after that. So Nocturnus, after they fired me, they lasted about 6 months, and that was it.
Right on. And then did you guys in Acheron do a bunch of touring?
Yeah, we did a bunch of tours. Yeah. Well, I didn't tour with them. They actually, back then, we didn't do any touring back then. So there was one tour we were going to do, and then that kind of fell apart because of the label. So we never really did any touring when I was in Acheron, and I just kind of like, some stuff started coming up, but there was like no money involved in it. And I had a place to live. I had a job again, and, I was working, and I was just like, I can't go on tour and leave my whole life here for nothing, for no money.
Right. Exactly.
And then, so me and Vince talked about it. He's like, well, I'll get a drummer to do the tour. And I was just like, look, this is just not going to work, this way. I don't think that's a good idea. And I just kind of was like, I'm kind of done with it. So for a little while, I didn't do anything. I was just like, frustrated with the whole situation.
And working.
Yeah. And so I just was like, I'm just going to work and save my money up, and, maybe I'll do another band again. And I ended up jamming with some some friends of mine here and there, but there was a little period there where I just didn't do anything for a couple of years, and just kind of went back to having a regular life. So then I was just like, I ended up doing a couple bands, and then I started kind of talking to Gino and Richard again, and they're like, well, why don't we get back together and start playing again? And so we kind of put the original Nocturnus back together, but without Vince. And we had another guitar player, and we were going to do a show called under the name Nocturnus, because Nocturnus had split up. And all of a sudden, we announced that we're going to do a show with Monstrosity at the State Theater as Nocturnus. And it was me and Gino and Richard and another guy named Mike playing guitar. And it was like, as soon as we announced that show, I get a letter from the lawyer saying, cease and desist, cease and desist. You can't use that name. Nocturnus is back together. And I'm like, what?
Jesus.
And I thought at the same time they had got back together, but not with Earache, with another label. And another label had promised them, they had dropped the singer that they had got, Dan, and the bass player that we had started singing. And so they went to do an album with Seasons of Mist, and they did an album, and it bombed really bad. And so at that point, I did After Death.
So you just basically changed the name to After Death?
Yeah, because, I thought about, actually, I had even thought about Nocturnus AD back then. But I was just like, you know what, I'm just going to get rid of the whole Nocturnus thing and just call it After Death. People will get it. They'll understand. And so I did After Death for several years.
Oh, yeah.
And we were doing all right. We did, a couple albums. Nothing really took off like it should, like I thought it might, but we were still doing shows, and we were doing it, and we were recording. We did several demos and an EP and a split album. So things were going all right, and a bunch of people we were playing a lot of the Nocturnus songs anyway, off the key. When we do live shows, we play stuff. We play, After Death stuff. We'd kind of, even every once in a while, we'd do an old Morbid Angel song for an encore, things like that. And people just kept saying, man, you guys sound like Nocturnus more than Nocturnus did after you left. And I was just like, everybody kept telling me, you need to do it again. You need to do it again. You need to do it again. So I knew I couldn't take the name. So I just said, okay, I'm going to do Nocturnus AD, and I'm going to pick up where the key left off. And as soon as we did that, we recorded a demo and put it out, and it just took off. And it was the same people After Death. It was so weird because it was the same people. And After Death was doing okay, but nothing like what Nocturnus AD ended up doing. And as soon as we put, we recorded like 6 songs ourselves, and we put one song out, and it just took off. And all of a sudden, I had 10 labels offering us record deals. Killer. And I'm like, okay. And, Profound Lore I had ideas of what I wanted to do. I wanted video, I wanted at least one song video. I wanted a decent budget so we could go in a really good studio and record. And, pretty much Profound Lore was the one that stepped up over everybody and said, everything you want to do, I'm fine with. So we ended up with Profound Lore, and, we got a 3-album contract with them. So we've done 2 albums now with Profound Lore, and it's been really good. They're a great label. Had no problems with them whatsoever. They're always on time with everything they say they're going to do. Everything they've done even more than they promised they would do. So, the contract was really good. It was not super complicated, super long. It was very fair to us, royalty wise. Everything was really good, almost like too good to be true, but it really ended up being true. So, it's just, they're the best label I've ever actually worked with in my whole career. So I'm really happy where we're at now. We got 2 albums done, and, we're going to definitely do another one and see how that goes, and just take it from there.
Fuck yeah, man. You've done a couple other things in between, like, Argus? You played with Argus?
Yeah, yep. Like I said, we talked about them earlier, and I used to go see them when I was in Morbid Angel, and they were a huge A circuit band. They had their own not tour bus, but camper kind of thing, like a big one.
Yes.
And they used to tour up and down the East Coast, all the way up into New York and all that, and just play the A circuit of bars. And they made a lot of money back then, you know, for a bar band. They were like one of the best. They were probably the heaviest bar band, you know, and because they did, like I said, they did Angel Witch, old Iron Maiden stuff, Black Sabbath, and Scorpions, things like all the stuff they did was heavy. And then they threw in, of course, a couple originals here and there, but not that many. But they, you know, everything they did was like, you know, metal. They were like pretty much the only touring metal bar band.
I think I remember seeing you with them in Orlando at this like near this triangular intersection, and there was a bar there. God, that was a long fucking time ago.
Well, we did do a show there. It was strange because their drummer had moved away and lived in another state, and then they kind of got back together and we're going to do a reunion thing, but they didn't have a drummer. And since I used to go watch them guys all the time, I used to see one of the guitar players a lot. I used to, you know, see him out all the time, Glenn, and you know, we always kept in touch and talked and everything because I always thought Argus was great. And he's like, hey, he goes, we're going to do Argus again. And our original drummer is not here anymore in Tampa. And, you know, we need somebody that's local to do this stuff. And he's like, would you want to do it? I'm like, hell yeah.
Fuck yeah.
So, yeah. I was in After Death at the time, actually.
Did y'all play together ever?
No, we didn't do a show together ever.
That's probably why I went and saw Argus in Orlando, probably because of you. I'm sure it was. Had to be, because we've been friends since, 87.
Yeah, I did quite a few shows with Argus. We did, you know, several shows when I was in the band for about 2 years. And then a lot of the guys, they were even older than me. So some of them were having health problems and things like that. And the singer was having some throat problems. And so it just kind of like fell apart. But I had a great time playing in Argus. It was fun.
Hell yeah! And you did okay.
I did a band called Headshot for a little while with some of my friends here in Tampa. They were in some other bands too, and I don't know if you know Jeff Vitolo.
No, I don't think so.
He was in a band called Entice. They were pretty.
Oh
big.
yeah. I remember Entice.
Yeah, and then
kind of a hair metal.
Yeah, they were kind of like hair metal, but he's still around, of course, but, and they wanted to put this band together, and they had a guy named Ronnie playing drums, which was from the Belching Penguins. He was a really good drummer, but he had moved to Bradenton, so they kind of needed a drummer local, and I knew the guys, all the guys in the band were friends of mine, and they were like, man, we really need a drummer, and I'm like, I wasn't doing anything at the time. This is before, you know, this is after Acheron, but before After Death. And so I was like, yeah, you know, I'll do it. And they, you know, we did all original stuff anyway. So we started playing, and man, it kind of took off pretty big. We ended up opening up for Typo Negative and Genitorture, stuff like that. Yeah, we played some really big shows. And as things were starting to go pretty good, and then one of the guitar players ended up, he was wanted for something and we didn't know it, and the cops came looking for him, and he ripped everybody off from our warehouse money and just disappeared. And that pretty much split the band up right there.
Wow.
Yeah. After that, I was just like, you know, everything just, you know, one thing after another kept happening with bands like that, you know, weird stuff. And I was just like, I was over it. But it only lasted maybe 2 years that I didn't do much. And then before I started After Death and Argus, did the Argus thing too. So
you also did a little bit with Lethal Prayer.
Yeah, when Vince moved, when
Lyle
moved back here, he joined After Death. And we were getting ready to do a tour, and we had a couple other guitar players that just weren't really getting what we were doing. And so I told Belial, hey, you want to join After Death? We had a tour coming up for Europe. And he's like, sure, man, I'll do it. So he joined. And while we were doing that, he's like, hey, I got a band called Lethal Prayer. Would you want to do drums for it? So we kind of started jamming on some of that stuff. And it just, his stuff is really complicated and really fast.
Yeah.
And it's not grindcore, but some of the stuff is kind of like that. And it's just not really my style of playing. Like, I'm not like, I can't play fast all night like Deicide does.
Yeah.
It's not really what I want to do.
Right.
I like being able to do my kind of thing. And that's why I really don't like playing in too many other bands for the most part. But, Acheron wasn't a fast band. Of course, Argus was, Black Sabbath style stuff. And, so that's more, I like that kind of stuff.
Right.
And I can play fast, but I don't want to do it all night long, blast beats all night. And it's just not my thing.
Right.
So it's like, we learned a few songs, Lethal Prayer wise, and it just wasn't really kind of like working with me. And, I told him, I said, I think you can find somebody, that's more suited for the band than me.
Gotcha.
And he's like, I understand. I know the stuff's pretty brutal. Like, yeah, it's more the work than I want to do. I don't want to work to play drums. I want to enjoy what I do.
Right. It's just not your thing.
Yeah. I was learning the songs, but it was really tough, and it wasn't my kind of style.
Yeah.
So, and actually our keyboard player is a drummer, and he's more of a drummer than a keyboard player, believe it or not. He can play guitar, keyboards, everything. So he's like a well-rounded musician, and he's like really good at grindcore and stuff like that. So he's actually playing in Lethal Prayer now.
Oh, gotcha.
So that worked out good because Vince finally, I don't know why I keep saying Vince.
Belial.
He found somebody that actually does exactly what he wants for drums. So that worked out pretty good. And they're actually playing the Swarm Fest that we're playing. They're playing Friday. We're playing Saturday.
Yeah. Who is your band currently that you have as Nocturnus AD?
Well, it's myself and Belial and Damien, which have been in the band for a really long time. All three of us have been jamming for about almost like, I want to say like 15, 16 years now.
A long time.
Yeah. And all of us were in After Death, and we're all, and Nocturnus AD since the beginning. And Josh, our keyboard player, he joined about 6 or 7 years ago now. And then we just got a new bass player, Kyle, and he's been in the band just maybe 6 months, something like that now. So this is going to be his show.
He's got quite the resume too, Kyle.
Oh, Kyle, yeah, he's an amazing. He's done stuff with, he's done that side band with Kelly from Atheist. He's in Astronomica with Wade Black. He's in Nasty Savage now. He's got like 5 bands that he plays in.
Yeah, an original from the back in the day bands, Blackout and Messiah X.
Yep.
Shit, I didn't even he was in Disincarnate.
Wow, I didn't even know that.
If it's true, we can't believe the internet.
He may have jammed with them. I'll have to ask him about that one, because I didn't even know that. But he's a great bass player, and it's really made us, it's like stepped up our game, because he's really good and technical too at the same time.
Okay,
so when he joined the band, he actually wrote all the songs out, all the bass parts. He figured them out by himself and wrote them out on paper. And when he came to practice with us, he had like 5 or 6 of the songs written out on paper. And we're like, what? You did that without anybody helping you? He's like, yeah. So it was kind of odd to see that, and it is kind of hard because he doesn't, practice with us every practice that we practice, because he's got, several other bands that he plays in too. But the thing is, when he does show up, he like knows everything that he's supposed to know.
Yeah, yeah.
So, you know, instead of having another bass player that we had, you know, that rarely showed up, and then every time he did show up, we had to reteach him everything because he would never practice. This guy comes right in, just plays the songs like they were nothing, you know. So it's made us sound a lot better having somebody that can do that.
That's killer. And you mentioned Swarmfest coming up, this fucking killer. And wait, before I get into that, man, I got to tell you, through all the years, even when I first moved here, it was always the topic that, first of all, Mike, you've always been a cool freaking dude, man. Just down to earth, mellow, no drama to me that I've ever seen you. And you talk to everybody. You take the pictures because they want to take pictures with you. You're a legend, of course. And from all the other musicians, the Obituaries, the Deicides, the Atheists, everybody kills them to see what had happened to you through the years in different bands that we talked about. They were like, man, what the hell? You know, they don't understand how it could happen because you're just a fucking killer drummer and you're a staple in the community, man. And everybody loves you here. That's for sure. They've always had your back, man.
Yeah. The thing is, you know, I think it is that I just get too trustworthy with people. And then I don't know what happens, but these people want to take over the band, you know, and I start bands. Even with Morbid Angel, Trey and I pretty much started the band together, and somebody always wants to end up being the boss, and I'm not really a boss in any of my bands. Even Nocturnus AD, I like everything we do. I try to make it where everybody has a say so. I don't get paid more than anybody else. You know, when I saw what happened in Morbid Angel with two of the guys making twice as much as the other two guys and this and that, I'm like, you know, and even live, you know, if we get paid, you know, X amount of dollars live, X amount of dollars, the same amount goes to everybody.
Divided equally. Yeah.
You know, and when we get royalties, even though I wrote all the lyrics, I could take 50% of the royalties if I was a business person, you know, but I think I've always been tried to be too fair pretty much with people, I think. And then I end up getting taken advantage of because of that.
And that sucks, man. Don't change though. You're awesome, dude.
Well, I'm just me, and I don't think I'll ever change. So I've always been me. And I never wanted to be like, I see all these people, they want to be this, they want to be that, you know, they've changed who they act like. And, you know, they have influences to where it actually changes their life. And to me, I've just always just been me. You know, I don't want to sound like anybody else. I don't want to be like anybody else. There's bands that I like, of course, you know, but I don't want to sound like Slayer. I don't want to sound like Merciful Fate.
Right.
You know, the stuff I listen to, I don't want to sound exactly like any of those bands. I still want to do what I want to do. And if people like it, that's great. If they don't, then, oh, well, I'm still doing what I want to do.
Yeah.
And I think because I'm so lackadaisical on that stuff, you know, like I just let it, you know, like I want everybody to be happy in the band, but then it always somebody ends up wanting to be the tyrant and take it over.
Right. That's how I am. I want everybody to be happy. Can't we all just get along, bitches?
Yeah, but there's always one person that always ends up screwing up the whole band. And if you look at history of bands, it's like that in almost every band. There's always been, I mean, you know, you have your exceptions, of course, but how many bands have kept the same lineup forever and not changed anybody?
Right. Very few.
You know, and there's a reason for that. You know, somebody always messes up. And whatever it is that they do is just the fact that they just didn't want to get along with everybody else and, you know, just be part of it. But then, you know, of course there are bands where one person starts the band and they want to be the ruler, you know, they want to hire everybody else and they're just hired musicians and, you know, they're going to write everything and do everything and oversee everything. And, you know, and I've never been that kind of person and I never want to be that kind of person, but I have a lot of ideas and I want to be able to do my ideas, but I don't want to be overbearing with anything.
Right. And you it sounds like you got the solid lineup right now. Of course, you've been through, you've had some of these guys forever, you know?
Yeah.
With the Nocturnus AD.
The two top players have been working together for a really long time, you know, and everybody's happy. So it's like, you know, things happen in people's lives, and I understand that too. And I gave some people way too many chances. And it was just, and when it ends up being detrimental to the whole band, then sometimes you got to make a change.
Yeah.
And put the friendship thing aside, because it's like you're spinning your wheels for nothing. You're practicing, and then one person's holding the whole thing back.
Yeah.
And it can happen that way very easily, especially when you have 5 people trying to get along
with different personalities.
So, yeah, everybody's completely, and that's one thing I do like about our band is everybody is completely different, and they all got like Belial's got a different style of playing than Damien by miles. You know, Damien's more of a heavy, chunky death metal player, and Belial's almost like a Pink Floyd death metal player. You know, and those two together really make a cool guitar team, because they're not very similar in the stuff that they write and what they play. Belial loves experimenting with like guitar synths and all kinds of weird stuff, and Damien's just like, you know, the heavy guy, you know, that does the heaviest stuff, you know, and the shredding, and so it really works out quite well that way.
You know, I've always known you as having a very large drum kit. A lot of times I think, I don't even know if have you ever had a non-rack system?
Well, you know, in the beginning it wasn't a rack because they didn't even have them back then. Like my first kit with Nocturnus was just an Imperial Star Tama kit. I had a lot of cymbal stands and stuff, but it wasn't a rack. I didn't get the rack till the 90s. I mean, till the, actually almost 2000s.
I gotcha. But I just remember you having a humongous drum kit all the time. How many pieces is your kit now?
Well, now I've kind of changed it a little bit. It's still kind of bigger, but it's different because now I've got 5 toms and 1 floor tom, and they're rototoms. They're all rototoms. So they're not drums, they're rototoms, which means it's just a rim with a head on it that you can kind of spin and tune differently.
Gotcha.
And there's no body to the drums. So, you know, when people were complaining, like I said before, the earache, complaining that, hey, you got this huge drum set and all you can see is drums, and then this voice coming from the drums, you know, as far as the vocals. So I thought, well, I'm going to put this kit together it's rototoms. So it's all just rims. So you can still see me now a lot better. And my 2 bass drums are Ludwig Vistalite clear drums. So they're acrylic, so they're clear. So basically you can see through my whole drum set now.
I gotcha. Okay.
So even though we still have a good amount of toms, and the thing is I use them all. You know, some people have these huge drum sets and they don't even use half the stuff on there.
Right. That's true.
Everything I have, I use on almost every song.
How do you go to these festivals in Europe and other countries and shit without, is it a smaller kit or do they accommodate you or?
No, it's usually smaller. I usually have to, I usually get the normal 2 bass drums and 3 toms, or, you know, sometimes I can get 4 toms if you know, and I usually only use 1 floor tom. A lot of people use 2 floor toms, but I've always just used 1. I have an extra one, I can use, but I just don't even use it. So I don't put it on my drum set. So, you know, but if I wanted to use it, I do have an extra one. I could have, you know, like 7 toms.
Right.
Because like in that Morbid Angel, I always had the 4 main toms, 2 on each bass drum, 1 floor tom. That's 5, and then I'd have these little tri drums, like 3, like a 6, 8, and 10 inch, for those really high, you know, like you know, Rush but a lot of people, instead of buying those in drums, they'd get the little 3 rototoms, the 6, 8, and 10 inch.
Yeah.
So since I was using those a lot, I ended up just replacing the other, well, instead of 4 toms, it's just 3 toms over the kicks. And then just 2 rototoms to the left of that. So it's just 5 toms, which is really not that much more than what most people have.
I gotcha.
Most people have 3 or 4 toms and a floor tom, or 2 floor toms. So most people have 5 toms, and I've got 6. So it's really not that much of a difference. It's just I really like those high pitched, rolls that I do, and I use it. Like I said, I use it a lot. So, and then cymbal wise, I really have less cymbals than most people. I only have 3 crash cymbals.
Gotcha. And what's the brands?
Most of it is Zildjian. Like my ride is an old Zildjian. It's custom, and it's I've had it for a really long time because I like the bell sounds on the Zildjians. And then most of my crashes, I got 2 16s and an 18 crash and a China and a little splash, and that's it. So, I say a lot of drummers have a really elaborate cymbal setup, but I don't really have that. I got 2 16s and an 18 crash and a China and a ride and a little splash cymbal.
And what's the brand of the drums themselves?
Well, the drums are like I said, they're rototoms. They're actual real, they're rototom. I think Ludwig makes has always made the real rototoms. And the thing is, the rototoms and the kicks, they're all 1970s.
Wow.
So yeah, they're all from the 70s, and my snare too.
Killer.
My snare is a 1967 Ludwig Superphonic Super Sensitive, like what Bonham used. So even my snare drum's from the 60s.
Heck, that's badass.
Yeah, it's an old kit. The rototoms are the original ones from the 70s. They were better than the ones they make now. The metal is much better on them. And like I said, the bass drums are 1970s Vista lights, just like Bonham used, and the snare too. So it's a Ludwig 1967, and that's pretty much. And then I have a set of chimes, of course.
Hell yeah! Okay, I'm gonna let you go soon, but before that, throughout the years, your lyrics, what have you always touched on? I know you do a lot of science and I guess science. Can you elaborate on your lyrics, the different styles that you write about?
Well, early on,
or subjects, Angel, I should say.
Yeah, early on it was more the evil satanic stuff, and everybody was kind of doing it back then. Slayer, yeah. Everybody, but we touched on a lot more of the Necronomicon stuff, and Trey was more. He would write more of the Necronomicon stuff, and I did too, but he wrote more of that, and I wrote more of the straightforward kind of satanic, Chapel of Ghouls type stuff.
Yeah.
And then I kind of started that with even with Nocturnus, I started writing stuff like that because Vince, of course, Vince, he's been into the occult for a really long time.
Oh, yeah.
And so it kind of like that kept me going on that path of writing that way. And then actually what happened was when we got Mike Davis and Nocturnus, me and him used to always talk about all the sci-fi movies from the 70s that we would always watch. And he's like, why don't we throw some lyrics in that are sci-fi too? And I'm like, hey, I'm okay with that. And so, he said he liked the Transformers a lot. I never really got into that cartoon myself that much, but he really liked it. And he's like, can I throw some ideas at you? And so he started throwing me some ideas that were sci-fi, and because I love sci-fi myself, I went right along with it. And I was like, yeah, let's do this. And so he would throw me a couple lines or maybe a song title, and I would just kind of complete the whole song so I could sing and play it. I always ended up writing, most of the lyrics because I'm singing and playing. So I got to make sure I can do that.
Yeah, exactly.
And so, and then kind of like with After Death, I went back to more occult type stuff. More like mysterious occult stuff more than satanic,
Mm-hmm.
So, I kind of got into a period of writing a lot of that stuff in After Death. But then of course, when I did Nocturnus AD, the whole point of Nocturnus AD was to pick up where the key left off. And that of course was a lot of sci-fi and occult mixed. So that's what I started doing with Nocturnus AD. I kind of kept that going and, just finding interesting things on the internet, like, just weird stuff, like the movie The Thing, Antarctic stuff, with monsters and sci-fi all mixed together. And then I really like ancient Egypt. So I've done a lot of Egyptian lyrics too.
Yeah, I do remember some of that. Yeah.
Yeah. So I kind of mix everything together. I don't want to write just one type of thing like I used to. So it kind of bridged out into sci-fi, Egyptian, occult, a little bit of evil thrown in there.
Right.
For school. And it's just, whatever interests
Got to throw that
basically.
token evil shit in there.
Of course you do. Yeah. That's it. So, I kind of kept it, I don't think I've changed a lot lyric wise. I'm, with the key, that was 1989 and 90 when I was writing all that stuff. And, so with Nocturnus AD, it took off, the first Nocturnus AD just started right off where the key left off because it was more of a story. The second half of the record was a story. And it was more of a loose story back then, but it kind of was a story. And then, the whole purpose of doing Nocturnus AD, when I went to do Nocturnus AD, I was like, this is going to be a continuation of the key. This is what Nocturnus AD is. It's not Thresholds. It's not anything before that, Science of Horror or anything like that. It's completely a continuation of where the story of the key dropped off. And I never got to do that with Thresholds because, obviously we got another singer and I wasn't writing the words anymore. Yeah. So that's what, basically Nocturnus AD, the whole point of that was to pick up where the key left off in 1990.
Hell yeah. And I know you got this Swarm Fest coming up. That's what we're all leading up to here. Swarm Fest 2024 at the Brass Mug in Tampa. And I don't have the dates on me. It's the weekend before Thanksgiving. And,
2 weeks away.
This is your first, show in a while here.
Yeah. The last show we played was actually, Maryland Death Fest couple of years ago.
Wow.
Right after COVID. So I think it was 2020 or 2021, I believe it was. So it was, we haven't played a show in a couple of years.
Wow. Do you have any other shows on the horizon? Europe, South America?
Well, we've got a few promoters. I don't want to throw anything out there that isn't concrete yet, but we definitely have some stuff that, people are asking us about now. The main thing was I wanted to put this next record out and I didn't want to keep taking breaks to do a show because then you got to practice a set for the show and not, I wanted to keep writing
right
and get the record out and then, worry about playing live again. Because to me, playing live is great and everything. I'm not a touring type of person. I've done tours a long time ago, but I just don't do that anymore. And luckily I can get on some fests like, Swarm Fest or even bigger ones in Europe, things like that. And we can do that without having to do 2 months of touring. We can go over there and do a festival in a weekend and come back.
Yeah.
So that's kind of like what we were focusing on before COVID. And, we did Maryland Death Fest, which is, over 5,000 people usually. So if we can get on these fests and just play a fest or two every year, I'm pretty happy with that. It keeps things going. And then I like to put out albums. So we're going to start working on the next album real shortly here after we do the Swarm Fest. And, if some shows come up and they're appropriate for us to do without, going over there and doing 2 or 3 weeks straight, to make it worthwhile, then we're going to probably pick up a couple of shows here and there and do them, but they'll mostly be fests.
And
so that's, the way we're kind of looking at things now.
And you just released this Unicursal on May.
Yep. The end of May. It was like the 20-something of May came out. I forgot the exact date, but yeah, it was like right around Memorial Day.
Gotcha. Hell yeah. Mike, I really appreciate you fucking joining me. It's awesome, man. It's always love. I mean, I talk to you whenever I see you out and about, and it's nice not to have a show going on and we can bullshit.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, yeah. When you see somebody at a show, it's always loud and you're like screaming at everybody,
Yeah, exactly.
It works, and you get to see people you haven't seen in a while when you go to these shows, of course. But, it's definitely good to now that you have this show yourself that you do, you know so many people, and a lot of them are actually really good friends of yours. And so you can have all kinds of really good guests on your show. And some people do these podcasts and they'll get bands that you never even heard of before and put them on there and things like that. But you know a lot of people that are in really well-known bands.
Yeah, I'm lucky.
But it works out great for doing the podcast.
Yeah, it does. It does. And I slack some because sometimes I just like to play music and not worry about doing an interview just because I like to just play some fucking music. Speaking of which, before, one last thing.
Sure.
Is there anything any music right now that you listen to, or do you listen to old school shit? Is there any newer stuff that you like to listen to? I mean, I'm all over the board. I listen to classical, believe it or not, driving. I have to chill. And I like bluegrass all these years, a little bit of old school country, thrash. I like some old school rock. I like metal, and I like new stuff from today, but I'm more exposed to it, if you will.
Yeah, I mean, I've listened to a lot of stuff, here and there, and people are always sending me things, and most of it just doesn't catch my ear like the old stuff does, of course. So I find myself always going back and listening to old Slayer, Merciful Fate,
Yeah.
Most of the time, and even me, I like to listen to a lot of the older classic rock, and like Led Zeppelin, Black Sabbath, stuff like that. I love throwing that stuff on. There's always, that's good for me. I mean, I do like Blood Incantation a lot. I think they're a really good band as far as like different from a lot of the stuff out now.
Yeah, and they're coming up. They're going on tour soon.
Yeah, I believe they just put out that new album, and it's really good. And they've actually stepped it up even more on this new album, and they're like the Pink Floyd of death metal now.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've heard the new record.
Yeah, I have heard some of it. Yes.
It's really different, and that's what I like. There's so many bands that, check my band out, and I listen to it, and it's just, there's a lot of stuff that doesn't catch me. And it's not that it's bad. It's just, most of it's actually really good music wise and playing wise. It's pretty phenomenal stuff. But I tend to go for the weirder, out there bands that a lot of people don't listen to. But Blood Incantation is actually starting to get pretty popular now.
They are.
I've liked, their stuff from the beginning. And even though it's changed a little bit, it's actually, to me, just got more mature.
Right. Yeah.
And to me, that's a good thing. Some people like that. Some people don't. Even my vocals, I've changed a little bit on this new record. And a lot of people, that's the one thing they didn't like. They're like, oh, you're not as heavy as you used to be. Well, I was trying to do a more of a narrative thing on this record because it is a story. Like most of the record is, and even the songs that aren't part of the story are little stories in themselves. So I went with more of a first person narrative on the vocals. And I'll probably change it up again and go a little heavier and just mix it up more because I think I did too much of that on this record and not enough of the old style.
Gotcha.
Hell but yeah.
And when are you plan on doing that next album?
Like I said, after the Swarm Fest, we're going to probably start writing again. So the last album took a while because of COVID. You know, everybody ended up getting sick at different times, and you know, you're taking. We only practice once a week, so it's very hard for us to get anything done quickly. You know, we get stuff done, but it takes time because everybody's got lives, and you know, like you said, trying to get 5 people together is kind of tough. So it took us a little while to write this last record, and it won't take us as long, hopefully, to do the next one. You know, we're going to try to do it in a lot shorter time and get more on it. But we were, you know, like I said, COVID pretty much took almost 2 years from everybody.
Yeah.
And that's a long time when you think about it. So, you know, we had just put out our first album, Paradox, and then COVID hit right after. And we had a lot of stuff planned. We had shows in Europe, all the festivals canceled, everything in 2019. Everything just stopped. So it was kind of like with us, it kind of stopped too. And like I said, just about everybody in the band got COVID here and there. I got it twice. I think some people got it twice in the band. I wasn't the only one. And it just, you know, ended up being sick. That's like 2-3 weeks right there. You know, before you know it, you haven't practiced in a month. And, you know, then you got holidays, things like that. People were doing other things. So it just kind of like, it took us a while to do this last record, but it won't take as long. We're going to purposely try to speed things up a little bit back to where we used to be.
Hell yeah.
So,
okay.
I mean, you know, but that's basically, you know, we're going to start writing again right after the Swarm Fest. Probably in January, more than likely.
What night do you play? Swarm Fest is November 22nd, 23rd, and 24th, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday.
Yeah, we're on Saturday night.
Killer. Well, Mike, I'll see you then. Hell yeah.
Definitely. I'll see you there for sure. I should be there probably all 3 nights, but definitely the first 2 nights I'll be there for sure.
Man, it's going to be tough. There's so many good bands playing too each night.
I know.
It's hard to stay the whole time.
It's got a good lineup. There's 10 bands each day, so there's good bands every single day.
Wow, that's amazing. And it's a good thing that Nick does, man.
Yeah, it's the only really good fest that's in Tampa, really.
That's true. I mean, there's a couple others, but yeah, they tried to.
I thought it actually was a pretty good turnout. I mean, I know they didn't, you know, like do as well as they were wanting to, but I thought it was actually a pretty damn good turnout, and it was a really good show, you know, and you know, all the bands that played it were great. They had a great lineup of bands.
Well,
so
it's in the talks to do it another time, but definitely won't be next year because it would be in January. So
yeah.
So maybe 2026.
Yeah, that would be nice. I mean, if they do that, I'd definitely be wanting to hop on that one.
Hell yeah.
If they, you know, I'm sure they wouldn't mind that.
No, not at all. They love you, man. They love you, and you know.
I love the Obituary guys, man. I've always liked them. They got their own style of doing things, and they've never changed. They kept to their true to what they do, and it's paid off for them.
Yes, and it also helps that they're all cool dudes, you know.
Oh yeah, exactly, for sure. Every one of them.
So,
you know, I think that's why they've been able to stay together as long as they have, because they're all laid back and very easy to get along with people, and they're good guys, you know, that you don't have any tyrants in that situation like I was talking about before.
Yeah, that's true. And those tyrants, if there were, and I don't remember if there ever any was, just maybe some with issues of abuse of certain
that
stuff.
Was not tyrant like stuff. Yeah, you know.
But anyways, Mike, fuck yeah, man. I'm looking forward to seeing you guys again, and we'll talk a little bit maybe that night. Maybe not, because it's a show, like we're saying. We'll say hi anyways. But we're going to talk before the end of the year because we got stuff we got to talk about.
Okay.
This exhibit coming up.
Yeah.
In January.
I know a little bit about that, so that's definitely going to happen then, huh?
Fuck yes, it is. And
nice.
I got some killer news I'll tell you later. But I really appreciate it, Mike. I'll let you get back to your daughter or your normal life. And I'll see you in a couple weeks. Hell yeah, man.
Yep, sounds great.
All right, brother.
See you then.
Thank you, Mike.
All right.
Appreciate it.
All right, man. See you, Dave.